Well, we start there now with that news from the Middle East, a serious escalation in the fighting between the United States and Iran. Overnight and into this morning, the American military targeting sites across the Islamic Republic, while Iran fired ballistic missiles at US air bases in Jordan and in Bahrain. Well, there's also been an escalation in the war of words. President Donald Trump vowing to reinstate the American blockade of Iran's ports and saying as well that he could now start charging ships for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Ellen Gainsford has our report.
Amping up its attacks, the US struck Iran for a third consecutive night. According to CENTCOM, the latest round of hits targeted Iran's coastal defense systems, missile and drone sites, and Iranian maritime capabilities. Washington and Tehran continue to wrestle for control of the Strait of Hormuz. In a reversal of policy, US President Donald Trump now says he plans to charge a 20% toll on cargo shipped through the waterway. The US had previously said that passage should be free of charge, in accordance with international maritime law.
I want to be reimbursed because we're protecting a very rich portion of the world. We're spending money. And so what we've done is we are going to be reimbursed for protection. We're protecting by the countries that we're helping.
Iran's foreign minister responded via social media.
POTUS is absolutely right. Whoever provides secure and safe passage of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz should be compensated for this service. 20% is, of course, too much. We will be fair.
Meanwhile, Iran's parliament says it's working on a bill regarding the waterway. Tehran hit back against US bases in Bahrain and Jordan early on Tuesday, as well as 2 Emirati tankers traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps accuses the vessels of ignoring warnings and turning off navigation systems. The UAE has since threatened to retaliate against Iran.
The UAE reserves its full right to respond to this escalation and to take all necessary measures to protect its territory, its citizens and residents in a manner that safeguards its sovereignty, security and stability.
The EU is calling for the strait to be open as it was before the war. And the UN's shipping agency also remains opposed to any attempts to charge for passage.
Let's bring you some analysis then on the situation in the region. Professor Scott Lucas is with me live. He's a professor of US and international politics at University College Dublin. Thanks for speaking to us today on France 24. First of all, just how serious do you think the escalation of the last 24 hours has been?
Well, I think we have seen ongoing clashes throughout this ceasefire. This, however, is perhaps the longest period of escalation that we've seen, now going well into its third day. And the extent of the escalation is concerning. As your report has just mentioned, we have had U.S. strikes which have extended across southern and western Iran, as well as on Iranian islands. We have even had U.S. strikes on non-military targets, including bridges. The Iranians themselves have expanded both their attacks in the straits. So we've had another 3 vessels who have been struck in the past since overnight. And we've had an expanded retaliation where the Iranians, for example, are firing on Bahrain. They are firing on Qatar for the first time since April. They fired on the UAE for the first time since May. The problem here is that we're in a limbo. We supposedly have a ceasefire, which is or is not holding. But in fact, we have neither war nor have we got effective negotiations at this point. And so any one of these cycles of clashes could escalate where there is a point of no return and we're back into a war.
And something that seems new in this kind of escalating tit for tat is those comments by Donald Trump that the US would demand a 20% tariff on cargo that is shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. We've, of course, heard Iran also talk about the idea of imposing tolls itself in the strait and charging ships. So can you help us understand which country would have the right to do that if either of them do, and who's really in control then in the Strait of Hormuz?
There is reality and there is rhetoric, and we need to deal with Trump as being rhetoric, but put it to the side for a moment. The reality here is that because the Americans agreed to negotiate on the basis of the MOU, Donald Trump agreed to do that several weeks ago without consulting his advisors. This was largely on Iranian terms. So the Iranian version of the MOU says we have the right to manage the strait. Now, for 60 days, it will not charge fees, but after 60 days, it could charge fees. And Iran wants to do that in cooperation with Oman on the southern side of the strait. The Americans do not want Iran to control the strait, but they box themselves into talking about it. So what are they doing? They're trying to break Iran's control with a passageway along the southern side of the strait, alongside the Omani coast. And when they do that, the Iranians fire on some of those vessels, saying they don't have permission to pass. And then we have these clashes to follow. So at the center of the current clashes is control of the Strait of Hormuz. And we have moved away from talks to resolve that. Now enter Donald Trump. He wants to come in and say, we control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran doesn't, we do. And then he says, and we can charge 20% tolls for it. At that point, he has made a serious mistake, because the American position all along has been, we want the Strait of Hormuz to be free to all, as it was before the war. He now has ruined that. That will upset Gulf states who do not want a 20% toll. So he's irritated his partners, and he's given the Iranians an opportunity, as you quoted the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, to say, we are the sensible people here. We may charge fees. Donald Trump says we can charge fees, but they will be less than 20%.
You mentioned Oman a little bit earlier on. I'm interested what kind of role you think that country could play in trying to solidify a diplomatic solution here, given that it has acted as a mediator before.
Oh, I mean, they are central to this issue because of their position in the strait. The problem here is they've now gotten caught in between the US and Iran in this quest for control. So on the one hand, you have Iran coming to Oman and say, let's work together. Let's manage the strait together. You then have the Americans coming to Oman. And of course, Oman trying to stay neutral, but America has a big presence in the region. And the Americans say, under no circumstances should you work with Iran. You should work separately. And you should not charge tolls and allow ships to run the strait, whether or not Tehran likes it or not. As a result of that, two things have happened. The Iranians went to Oman 48 hours ago, and they were unable to confirm a deal for management of the strait because Oman said, well, we'll have to manage our side of it, you manage yours. But then Iran, as part of its retaliation against the American attacks, has been getting more ships off the Omani coast. We come back to a fundamental here. If the Americans will not agree to negotiate on the basis of the MOU, we are in limbo. We are in limbo in the Strait of Hormuz with no foreseeable resolution and with these periodic bursts of military action that destabilize not only the strait, but destabilize the region.
All right, Professor Scott Lucas, good as always to get your analysis. Thank you so much.